So if you haven't guessed already, in this edition of Motorcar File, we present you the all-new 2015 Lamborghini Huracan, the latest bull out of the Santa Agata Bolognese factory. We're really excited to present an in-depth review of this car because while it's the little brother to the Aventador, it's just as extreme and uncompromising. And it's very nice to see a lot of the same DNA which produced that amazing Veneno and that polarizing one-of-one Egoista. So following that, this car employs a wide use of that traditional hexagon shape, and it's carried out throughout the car. So Filippo Perini, who is Lambo's design chief, perfectly explains every curve on the car and the message they're trying to convey. And it's actually very interesting to sit and listen to him talk about the Huracan and the level of thought and detail that went into designing everything about it. So the front of the car is where you can get a good sensation of the complex combination of edges and precision details. And to stray away from being totally geometric, there are blends of concave and convex curves over the fenders. And the headlights have a sweep to the side rather than to the back. There are, of course, a feature we like, floating fins above the front diffuser, which break into a monolithic cavity, one opening that sweeps from one side to the other, and is offset by a grille filled with, again, hexagon-type shapes and geometric features. The tail of the car echoes the front and, of course, all the other details, and has a unique blend of angles as the surfaces exit. Of course, the top of the tail sweeps up for aerodynamic and styling purposes. And the side profile of the Huracan is really, truly a sight to see because there's a hidden, they call it hidden, but there's a hidden line that it's sort of continuous. It sweeps from the roof, from the A-pillar, all the way back over the intake and completes a perfect hexagon. And another thing we like is how small and how well integrated the intakes are. So this Huracan has a newer generation carbon ceramic brake setup, which is a lot more precise and a lot easier to modulate. Of course, you have 20-inch wheels and a V10, which carries over and is more efficient and tuned different than the Huracan to produce 602 horsepower and 413 foot-pounds of torque. And we'll listen to it here with the mode selector set to Corsa. Before we get into the interior detail portion of the review, there are a couple of things to note. I think the first is that the misconception is that Lambo strayed away from naming this car after a bull and called it Huracan after a storm, which is not the case. Huracan was a fighting bull. It was a Spanish breed of bull that went undefeated a long time ago, 1870s or something. So it's well deserved to have a Lambo, brand new Lambo named after it. The other thing is that while this car has launch control, it's called thrust mode, and there's no button for it. You just turn off the traction and put the mode selector in Corsa, hold the brake, and mash the gas. But we'll get into everything in detail. And an exciting opportunity. Here we go. Here's the new key. So if you're familiar with Audi, you're familiar with this key, except that obviously the Audi won't have this gorgeous Lamborghini logo embedded into the polished metal portion. And of course into the handle portion, an embossed Lamborghini logo here. So it's a gorgeous new key, but very similar to an Audi key, almost identical. So you have lock, your trunk compartment in the front, and unlock here. And something cool about the Huracan, it is push button start, so you don't have to have the key into an ignition. But when you push unlock, the door switch blades out for you to open. Now, in the case of an emergency, the valet key, you can remove the valet key with this button, and you can actually remove this piece here and insert the valet key to open the car. It is truly a magnificent machine all around. I mean, it's the most exciting supercar we've ever tested just because it's so easy to drive, it's so ergonomic, and we'll talk about all of that. So here in the door panel, you get a gorgeous Alcantara inlay with a gloss black finish around the door handle. And this car has contrasting stitching which matches the orange calipers on the carbon ceramic brakes. So that's a gorgeous feature. Really, really nice touch here. And something odd that we noticed, I don't know if it's odd, it probably has some design purpose, but this little tab wedges into this slot here on the door sill. So that's pretty unique. Haven't seen that before. And you get a gorgeous metal door sill with the Huracan, geometric Huracan logo there. And let's get in and start her up. So startup procedure is pretty easy. You put your foot on the brake and you lift this fighter jet inspired switch cover and push start. And we have ignition. There is storage over here behind the steering wheel, behind this panel. So for now I'm going to stow the key there. And we are right now when the car starts, so you have this gauge layout. So we'll start with the gauges. You can switch the way these gauges look with these buttons here. You have your lap timer and instrument cluster menu button here that will take you through your trip information, next service due, battery, average speed, max speed, and lap times. And you can cycle through that with this button here. But you can lay out by default, and when we pick this car up, by default starts with this layout. But if you hold this button down, you can switch that layout to full navigation. What they say full navigation means that right now it's in radio, but if I switch it over to navigation, I'll show you how to do that here in a second. You'll get a full display of your navigation. Of course, you still get a speed gauge here. You also have a more dynamic layout, which is just your gauges. So just your tachometer, your speed. And an interesting feature, you can switch these around so that this shows your speed and this shows your revolutions per minute or your RPM. And the way you switch between those is by holding the up button of these three switches. So if I hold this again, it switches back into RPM and gives you your speed there on the bottom right hand corner. We're going to switch this back into the mode that it was when we picked the car up for the owner. But you can, it's very interesting, you can cycle through that. And because of the way everything is laid out now, you don't have a separate navigation screen. It's now integrated into this 12-inch TFT screen here. And during daylight, during nighttime, it's very clear. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Back at the door panel, so you have your door function here, regular door. It's not like the Aventa door. Door opens traditional. It's not a scissor door setup. You have unlock, lock, and the controls for your mirror. You have heated mirrors, retractable mirrors, and fully adjustable driver and passenger mirrors, and everything you can just rotate and move around. A little bit forward to that, you have your switches for your headlight. So you have your auto headlight function, daytime running lamps, your headlights themselves, your rear fog light, and your instrument cluster brightness here, all laid out very fighter jet inspired and very gorgeous and very tactile to the touch. So that was a real impressive piece for us. So just below the headlight switches, you have your control for your front trunk compartment and your rear engine bay. So you can open those with these buttons here. You have gorgeous metal finish foot pedals. And just to the left of that, you have this big geometric speaker cover in the door panel. So everything echoes this sort of geometric look, lines, angles everywhere. And you can see that all of the vents have this geometric look. Features on the outside have that geometric look. Lots of ostentatious angles and lines everywhere. But the beauty of this car is that it's just so ergonomic inside and so easy to drive. So coming over back to the center panel, we'll talk about the switches laid out here at the top. You have your window switch, driver window switch, passenger window switch. You have your front bumper lifter, so in case you're on a ramp, you don't want to scrape anything, you have your bumper lifter here. You have the traction control system, stability system, ESC on, off. And this is how you get into launch control, is by turning this off. You have your hazard lights and your camera system, your parking sensor system. So this little screen here right now is showing information about the car, oil pressure, oil temperature, and battery. However, just below these switches you have the climate control. With the climate control, this screen will relay what you're doing other than showing these gauges. For example, if I push the fan button, it'll switch over to the fan speed, and I can turn that up and down to switch the fan speed of the AC. Similarly, once it goes back into gauges, if I push this button down, it'll give me the temperature and I can turn the temperature. So respectively, whatever you push in the climate control will reflect here on the screen to tell you what you're doing. So everything has a very ergonomic side, and obviously that's credit to Audi for handling all of that. So you have your heat, the review of the all-new Lamborghini Huracan, the Gallardo replacement, and what a fantastic sensation. Honestly, one of the most ergonomic supercars I've ever driven. Right now we're in Strada, but we're gonna go ahead and switch it over to Sport. And you can see a downshift blip for me right there because it's in Sport. Everything's a little more aggressive. We're gonna put the shifting in manual. The A disappeared, so now it tells me I'm in manual shifting, so I can command the shifts up and down with the paddles. But other than that driving part, I mean, everything is really easily accessible. The reading lamps in the top stack here are very easily accessible. The door unlock switch, everything is real quick and real easy. And it's the same thing with the MMI system, the climate control system, and all that other stuff involved with the infotainment. So you have 602 horsepower, 413 foot-pounds of torque. You get max horsepower at 8,250 RPM, max torque at 6,500. There is just absolutely wild performance numbers, 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. I read Car and Driver did it in 2.5 seconds. I mean, that puts it in Aventador and Veyron territory. But the odd part is the Dr. Jekyll and Miss Hyde sort of personality, right? You know, when you're going in Strada and everything's in automatic and the suspension is in soft, if you didn't know outside was that ostentatious